Okay, we're in the middle or somewhere along the line in Parshas Chukos, uh, not Parshas Chukos, excuse me, Parshas Kairach. Kairach, remember, I think I said at the beginning, Kairach is Lashon, the language of making one cold. It speaks about Amalek. The pasuk about Amalek says, Asher koracha baderech. The simple meaning is, Korah means to meet, like you say to somebody, Ma korah, what's happening, what's going on? But Korach also means ice, kerach. The kerach is the ice. So in a very global way, what we're talking global, right? Our focus right now is on the global, the or makif. In a very global way, we can say that if someone does not get a sense of the infinity in the finite, or in the language of Kabbalah or Chassidus and Chassidus, the soivev in the mamali, the all-encompassing in the particular. If you're lacking that, that's a certain coldness to godliness. In other words, one can believe in God to the extent that we have obligations to Hashem and we fulfill them, and believe me, that is the ultimately most important thing, because masa hu ha'ikar, the deed, is the main thing. But in order to do the deed with gusto and with kavanah, and more than that, in order to see reality in the eyes of God the way God sees reality, which is that everything is constantly invested in Him and ain't on milvado, there's nothing besides Him, one needs to cultivate a sense, and it's a sense, it's not just pure intellect, it's the deeper levels of consciousness which fathom that God can be both, and that reality can be composed of both infinite and finite, even though they are intellectually contradictory at the same time. And that's really the subject of our mind. It was ticked off by the argument of Korach to Moses when he asked, is if a talus is made all of techeles, strands of wool which are dyed with techeles, does it need tzitzis? And the answer, one would think, well, probably not, because it says, "V'asur lachem tzitzis," that's the commandment. You should make tzitzis, right? Pasil techeles, with a string of purple. That's the way the commandment is expressed in the Bible. Well, hey, I've got all strands of techeles. Why do I need strings hanging from them? And the answer is you do. And the answer to why you need you do, why you need you do, why is it that you do need both, is because there are two kinds of energetics from Hashem. One, the all-encompassing, which is symbolized by the beged, which surrounds you, and then the finite, discrete, and ultimately material, which is symbolized by the tzitzis, and both of them are part and parcel of godliness. So with that, before we start, let me just say, if anybody, is that, just make sure that that idea is, settling in people. And if not, please let me know. Let's see. Okay, fine. So where we are, if you're following in the mimer, which I know some of you are, it's on page 144, the left-hand column, 17 lines down. The line begins l'regel, from head to toe. It's describing the Or HaSoivev. The Or HaSoivev I've been speaking about now as a faculty of godliness which envelops all of creation. We who are made in the image of God, but Selim Demus Tavnisa, He built us in the image of God, also have this duality, which is really a singularity, levels of all-encompassingness and all particularness. And he's been speaking to us about the all-encompassing, and he's using the example that if a person stubs his toe, it doesn't take any time at all for you to feel the pain. if it were to take it, that's a metaphor for the all-encompassing, meaning it's equally present everywhere. It's equally present in the toe as it is in the foot. Excuse me, in the toe as it is in the brain. The quality of the brain, of course, is very different from the quality of the foot. That's a function of the or mamali, the or which fills and makes differentiation. So he's giving that example. So
Now, could you just say the page again, because you said 144, but nothing says 144, so I have no idea what page you mean. It says 1, 2, and 3, so I don't which one are we on?
Second, more than a second. Cautious chaos. Okay. Doo-doo-doo. Oh.
There's pages 1, 2,
Yeah,
and
it
3.
says.
There's so I
Okay.
don't know.
Well, if you're, oh, which page in the handout, you mean?
Yes.
Oh, in the handout. All right, the handout, page 1. This is on page 2 of the handout in the left-hand column. The word on the top of the page is Eno Musag.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and you're 17 lines down. Look down, the first word in the column is regel, to the foot.
Perfect. I'll find it. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Okay, keep the place here. Okay, so, 1 second. Okay, so the analogy in the human sphere for the Or HaSoivev in the godly sphere is the energetic, which allows that an instantaneous response, and he's using the most extreme part of the body, far away from the brain, and also far away in terms of sensitivity. The brain, of course, is very sensitive, and the toe is not so sensitive. But immediately upon stubbing the toe, you feel it. It doesn't take any time for that energy to get there. That's a metaphor for the Or HaSoivev, which is everywhere equal all the time and present in a clump of dirt as it is in the holiest and highest of the angels. Okay, Ella. So now we're starting inside. Ella. However, Vadai, it's a certainty, that thought, meaning the instrument of the mind, that the faculty of the mind which thinks about things, encompasses everything. Therefore, since thought, and here he means not concretization of intellect, he means the power of the brain, because the brain is it's not only the central intelligence agency, it's the central agency for all chayas, and particularly all godly chayas, life force, because the brain, why does the brain rule over the heart? Because the brain influences, not only influences, is responsible for the responses in every part of the body. And if the responses from of every body parts are in response to the godly soul, which is resident in the brain, then literally all the body parts are in harmony with the universe. That's a really wide, colossal definition of health. That there's flow, circulation, flow, unblocked nervous energy that's flowing exactly where it should be all the time. So it's Ella. Roy is proper that the brain and the energy of the brain should be makefes, should encompass kol vodim, all the limbs. Therefore, it has an effect in the foot in this very same moment that the toe stubs its toe. right? Mamish. She'ola b'mashava. Or if you have a thought, an energy, let's take a more refined level. A hand, we've used this in the last time, a hand and the fingers playing piano. Have you ever seen, you probably have, a concert pianist or a really good an instrumentalist of any kind? The fingers or the keys or the strums or the chords, they're moving almost automatically. Now, initially, there's a lot of practice that goes into that. But when the concert pianist sits to play the concerto, the fingers are moving. You can't say that every movement is as a response to an individual thought. That would take forever. So there's a training that the brain has done to influence the fingers to move in accordance with the seichel, with the intellect of the piece, of the musical piece, but in a way that the fingers, as they used to say in the yellow pages, I'm dating myself, let the fingers do the walking. So we have to say that therefore the effect on the foot, for instance, back to the foot, she'ola b'mashava, when it rises up in the mind, lenena ragloi, to shake your foot, it moves immediately. Ach mikol mokim, nevertheless, bevadai ikra mishkan hamashava v'giluyov, nevertheless, even though that's true, that the brain is manifest in the foot instantaneously, the actual dwelling of that impulse, which does move the foot instantaneously, where did that originate? It originated in the thought of the brain. The Mishkan, the dwelling place, was thought of this revealed thing, Hubamoya, is in the brain. There is enclosed the or panimi, meaning the individuated response, but before it becomes individuated. This is what we call the or soivev, as it is a root for the or mamale. So the thought is there in a manner but in a manner that it will become exhibited in a specific way. But still, while it's in the brain, it's the source of what will be there. Therefore, it's called the source of the orpanimi. But at the same time, the state that it's in is a state which all the limbs are equal to it. It can instantaneously invest itself in the seeing of the eye or the movement of the big toe. And that we call that makif, all encompassing. Here's a parenthesis. Let me see this in there. Listen to this parenthesis. Take a look in Eitz Chaim. This is the Eitz Chaim of Rav Moshe Cordovero. Shar Seder Abiyah, the chapter which is about the order of the four worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. Soif Perek Yud Gimel, at the end of the 13th Perek, where he says, isn't it true that the thought is what brings about an effect? And so from this it's understood, that little piece is what makes us understand Gabe Shabbos, that when it comes to Shabbos, so he says about Shabbos, right? You say about Shabbos, God stops working, right? So the famous Klutz Kasha that comes up, if you stop working, how is the world going on? Well, the answer is lurking in what we've said. Because the world is sustaining itself by the Or Makif, which is everywhere equal all the time. That's not called work, by God. That's just, it's sort of like our own subconscious, which is always operating. We don't work at it. In fact, most of us are hardly aware of it being there at all. But it's there all the time, pushing things out, but without any, I have to direct it. Directing it, directed work with kavanah is what's prohibited on Shabbos. So he says, Gabi Shabbos. This is not quoting from the Eitz Chaim, in a Kabbalistic manner. What's happening on Shabbos that keeps the world alive is the makifim, the all-encompassing, which is always going on, enters into the penimius, which is the details, and nimshachas makifim elyonim yoser, and there's more of the makifim, of the Or HaSoive being drawn down. It's like the drawing down of the unconscious, unintentional effusion of energy to the foot to make the foot move without thinking. And now there's no avoidus machshavas. There's no thinking thought, no thinking work. Maleches machshavas, they call it, not avoid. Maleches machshavas, there's no work that's being done through conscious thought. It's just happening. Like the or makif as it moves the toe without any thought. Ubechinas makif. And what's happening, just like in the normal day-to-day activity of the world and the creation, the makif goes into the panimi, but in the panimi, in the weekdays and in the acts of creation, God is translating his thought into speech, and then his speech, so-called, into action, right? He's diffusing it down very specific channels. But on Shabbos, the Or Makif, the world is getting its life from the Or Makif. That's how the Arizal, the Moshe Kadavero explains, if work is prohibited, how does everything keep extant on Shabbos? In case anybody asks you. From this metaphor, Yuvan Kitsas, we can understand a little bit the Indian of the Ein Sof and the Or Makif. Excuse me, the Indian of the Or Panimi and the Or Makif. The fact is that the Or Makif is affecting and is bringing into being, and it enlivens, even though it's not really grasped. I can't look at it, I can't hold it in my hand, but oilimus in the worlds. For example, like the thought which moves the foot, immediately, and that so-called level of thought, which is not conscious intellect, conscious letters of thinking, but a deeper level of mashava, is actually surrounding all the limbs and organs of the body. How does the heart beat? Just think about what would it have to be if you had to think about the heartbeat, right? You don't. Why? Because it's being enlivened by a constant energetic which hits the heart and makes it move. Now, ultimately, that energetic becomes designed as heart energy. The same energy, if you look at it in a panimistic way, that is the strands of energy, there's a certain kind of neurological structure that's appropriate for the heart to beat. There's something else, neurological, organic, tissue, structure that's a foot, okay? So they do need to pick up something different, but at the same time, they're all equally, and here's the punchline for Or Makif, they're all equally in a state of being and equally in a state of enlivenment. That's the function of the Or Makif. The differences between them is a function of the Or Panimi. Even back to the Or Makif, even the foot doesn't grasp anything, there's no thought, there's no corresponding little receiver in the foot that picks up the wavelengths and transmits it and says, this is a foot thing. No, it's just moving the foot. And this is an analogy for the Or Makif, which encompasses, and when we say encompasses, we mean is responsible for the life force and the state of being of everything equally. And we say on this, well, no, we don't say on this. This is explained in other language and other detail in a different mimer, Al Pasuk Yonoisi, from Shir HaShirim, I believe. It says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. When we speak about our thoughts, we're usually thinking about, what did I just think a few minutes ago? I mean, I'm now thinking, believe it or not, about what I'm saying before I'm saying it, right? But there's something else going on, which is the notion of brain power itself. And so we cannot really grasp that which is makif because it's by definition ungraspable. That's one of the three words that you can keep in mind or jot down about the Or Makif. Number one, it's machaya, everything equally. Anything that has any state of liveliness in it, the differentiation of the quality of life is from the or panimi, but that there is life, chayas, is the or makif. The have, the havius, the havi I should have said first, that it's in a state of being at all. Various different states of being, but that it is a function of the or makif. And the third one is behelam. It's concealed, as he says at the end. My thoughts can not grasp your thoughts. This or makif is concealed. You don't see it. Conscious thought, the word conscious is, you see it, I'm aware of it. With this now we have a small kitzer, a small summary. Inyan Mamala Kalami and Soviet Kalami, we have now explained the topic of filling all worlds and encompassing all worlds. Because we had two contradictory sentences. One contradict God says about himself, my earth, the whole earth is full of my glory. And we take it like only my glory. It isn't me, it's my glory, right? And another says, Esa Shamayim V'Esa Oretz Ani Molech. And the other says, heaven and earth I fill, my very self. So which one is it? Both. His glory is the Orpanimi, something of himself, and that he himself fills the heaven. Ani, the I, is the Ormakif. Okay. And he says both of these are drawn from the Kav, the original beam, called Shorsham. Nevertheless, one is Mamali and one is Soivet. Ve'aliyas ha'oilamis, and all the various levels of worlds, the levels of world, aliyas ha'oilamis, b'shmitin b'yavoles, in their qualities of the yovel, the Shemitah year, the 7, this is talking about time, levels of worlds in terms of time and place, right? There are two dimensions in things, place and time. In terms of time, you have a year, then you have a Shemitah year, which has a different quality, and then you have a yovel, 50 years, all of which is different quality. So that's all. Now that we understand this, those are references to filling all worlds. That's where differentiation takes place. And that's drawn from the Kav, the original beam of light. Before that, there was an allness of light before the beam. The beam, right, I'm doing this with my hand, indicates a particular thrust of direction and a particular quantitative function as well as qualitative. When you start differentiating quantity and quality, you're in the world of Mamalikolin. So that comes from the Kav. The Kolmokim, Shorsham, nevertheless, the root of that Kav, the root of that origin of Mamale is in Panimi, is in the Or Makif. Soivi Kalam. Elias Oilim is B'Shmita Miavolis, and the level of worlds of years are Kolba within its Mamale Kalam. That's all in the level of Mamale because it's differentiated, Shemitah and Yovel, etc. Soivi Kalami, if it's Soivi, it's Hashava Umashva. It's equal and it's an equalizer amongst everything. This is the punchline which we had earlier. Think about this. We have expression of our sages, right? I think it's Pirkei Avos, I'm not sure. Better is 1 hour of Shuva and Maisim Tovim than Kol Chai Olam Haba. The answer is because Kol Chai Olam Haba is levels and levels and levels. Mitzvahs come from that part of God which is makif. His simplicity, his simple will is invested in mitzvahs. And therefore, when you touch a devar mitzvah, a thing of a mitzvah, with the notion of doing the mitzvah with it, you're in touch actually with the makif, not the panini. And that's the inner understanding of better is one moment of tshuva and ma'asim tovim in all the levels of the future beautiful spiritual worlds. That's the end of that ois. This was a kitzer. Let me pause here for wet my whistle, so to speak. And anybody got anything you want to say? Okay. So we will begin ois beis. This was all the first chapter, first section of this mind. Vehine, Masha Kosa, Mole Kola Oris Kavoide. This which it says, my glory fills the earth, right? Meaning to say, not me, myself, and I, but something of me, which is called my glory. Here we're going to focus on what to say, Mole Kola Oris, the earth. Why the earth? Why don't we say the heavens are full of my glory? No, heavens, he says, I here fulfill the heavens and the earth equally. But my glory is in the earth. Why, specifically? I know, why is that? Okay. Kol molekot oretz kavoide. He ain't covered elatorah. There's no glory. When we speak of what is God's glory, and this whole world glory, I don't think I've ever had the, the opportunity to use the word glory about anybody. Think about it. I don't think so. So what does it say? The whole earth is full of my glory. Okay. Ain't covered elatorah. What is that glory which fills the earth? This is the Torah. This is the Torah. Kaved bigamatria lamed beis. If you're looking inside and you're seeing the word kaved and you add up the total of the numerical value of those four letters, you get 32, which 32 in the language of Kabbalah is lamed beis nesivas chachma, 32 channels of wisdom. Of course, lamed beis is also the heart. So there are 32 channels of brain power that are designed to come and fill the heart. Belev chushim the tzitzis, then hutim, and then that corresponds to the 32 strings of the tzitzis. So you have this all-encompassing consciousness, right? We're speaking now in the metaphor of a person. This all-encompassing consciousness, for lack of a better term, we'll call it the subconscious, a pool of undifferentiated something that hardly, most of the time, we don't even have visibility into it at all. And therefore, it's more like the Ormakif, which it's hidden. It has that hidden quality. Sometimes in Chassidus, the subconscious is likened to the deep ocean, right, where you can't see down into the bottom of it. Okay? So, but from there emerge, bubble up, since I'm using the water motion, bubble up to the top. If you're on the surface, you see particular formations. So we'll go further with this. So we have 32 channels of Chokhmah and 32 strings of the tzitzis. Chokhmah, it says about Chokhmah, Chokhmah me'ayin timotze. Chokhmah comes from the ayin. Chokhmah, right here in the right part of the brain, is the most close to, and it is the interface to the Or HaSoivet. The ayin, Chokhmah me'ayin timotze, says Chokhmah comes from ayin. Chokhmah comes from the Or HaSoivet, and it brings that Or HaSoivet into Mamala. So there are lamed beis chutim of tzitzis, 32 strands of the tzitzis. Vazehu hoide al eretz v'shamayim, and that's what it means. My hod, another word for glory or splendor, my splendor, is on the earth and the heavens. And it says, hoidu al eretz v'shamayim, kadma oretz l'shamayim. It proceeds, first is earth and then heaven. If you're talking about your panimi, it's a drip down, right? It's called Seder Histalshalis, from the top to the bottom. So the language should have been is in my heaven and in my earth. But it says, Heidu al eretz v'shamayim, the earth first. Kadma oretz v'shamayim. It precedes earth to heaven. V'gili haidu v'zivo yisborach al yidei HaTorah. And that refers to the glory and the illumination of God himself. May of him be blessed through the Torah. Where was the Torah given? Leiba Shemayim. The Torah wasn't given for angels. It wasn't given to the heavens. It's the most panimi. Oh, that's not a good word to use because we're using panimi to mean the definite. It's the deepest indefinite dimension of God himself. And where was it given? Lay b'shamayim. It's given on planet Earth. Shirashirim Rabbah, Midrash on Shirashirim. Soif Perek Kerem. I don't know what that is. So this was the garden that when he's describing the garden of Shlomo HaMelech, he describes the garden of King Solomon. Now, Inyan who, I don't have any light to shed on that. I haven't researched it or read it. The Inyan is this. We'll explain what's the idea. The idea is the following. The root revelation of godliness, Elokus, godliness, in the vessels, light in vessels, comes from the elevation of the worlds. Beis alafim yavnes, the 50,000 jubilees. Ili achar ili, elevation after elevation. So this is introducing the idea that avodas Hashem, serving Hashem down here below, creates an advantage that wasn't there before. We're calling this advantage elevation. We elevate one higher and higher and higher up to the boundary, and then through the boundary back to the essence of Hashem himself. Hi, Jonathan, your hand's up.
Rabbi, I wanted to ask it before exactly what you said, from the mata to the mala.
Yeah, exactly.
Elevation of vessels to a higher, I don't know if the actual, the chumnios, but the elevation to a higher and higher.
Right.
So I'd beg the question afterwards, what's involved in the teleological process? Does that relate to the fundamental question as to why Hashem created the universe?
Yes, it does. And it creates even to the specific fundamental question, why planet Earth? And, what is all that other stuff that preceded it? Whether it's not preceded it in time, but higher than it, Heavens up above, earth below. Why all that stuff? I had a friend, I think I may have told you this, I had a good friend, a colleague actually, in a consulting engagement that I was running for a small company. He was an avowed atheist. And he said to me, Avi, you mean to tell me that all this stuff up in heaven is just window dressing for planet Earth? I said, yeah, in a certain way, that's right. It's all stepping stones for this. And so that theologically, that means in the end. What's the end? Right? The end indeed, planet Earth, the bottom of the chain, was first in his thought. So we'll get through this now. So we'll shed some light on this. So we have the Nun Alafim Yavlis. It's the 50,000 jubilees, elevation after elevation, until there's a revelation of the Or Ein Sof. So the Or Ein Sof, the beginning is wedged in the end. You've heard me say that before. That's a quote from Sefer Yetzirah. The end is wedged in the beginning, right? And by doing stuff down here below, i.e., Matan Torah was given down here below, not to the angels, not in the heavens. So then we turn this around, that this substantial stuff down here below, the most substantial, the thickest, right? The thickest and the most solid is down here in earth. When you go up above, there are other heavenly bodies, but even the other physical heavenly bodies don't have the same constitution of their physicality is not the same as planet Earth. And then all the spiritual, and then all those other physical bodies, they're called the mazolas. Why are they called the mazolas? Because they're channels for spiritual energies, all of which are invisible, the spiritual energies, but all of which is focused. It's like there's a huge concerto of light beam focused on this single point in the middle of the stage, which is the little guy, planet Earth. And planet Earth is holding light in it that originates back before light had even been emitted. That's the notion of the end. The beginning is wedged in the end. So, Hine Yisrael, the Jewish people, Hamshichu be'es Matan Torah, they drew down at the time of Matan Torah. Remember, it's a gift. Matan, matana, the word in Hebrew, is a gift. We tintillated Hashem. But this tintillation occurred way back in the very first place. He had been tintillated. The notion of us tickled his fancy, so to speak, way back when, before we or any planet or anything had been created. But we motivated him as he thought about, these guys and men and women down here and this stuff of wool, this is going to give me great pleasure. This is where I'm going to reside my deepest will into these particular things down here below. So we, as in a certain sense, even before we were created, he's already starting to desire us. And when we are created and we're doing his mitzvahs, we're tintillating him even more. So we're kind of drawing him out, as it says here. Yes, Matan Torah, that there should be revealed now, meaning at the time of Matan Torah, or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the light of the Infinite One, may he be blessed. That which needs to be revealed, for that which is required, requisite for this revelation, and for the elevation of one thing over another. In other words, the whole Seder Histalshalos. Things are coming down in order to go up. It's the coming down for the sake of the going up. It's Yorida Sorach Aliyah. Ever heard that expression? Coming down for the sake of going up. Yeah, Jonathan, again. I'm seeing your hand up again.
Yes, Rabbi, I just wanted to point out, is that what, when you created what was Lamata, you said even with a little bit of light in the earth, is that making reference to the spark that will force its way towards realization and rise higher and higher?
No, I wasn't thinking, no, I wasn't referring to that. I was referring to the little bit of light, right? Because it's a narrowing down, right? A lot of godliness, hope, a lot of bigger mamale up there than down here, meaning greater revelation up there than down here. But that little bit of light which comes down here is the conveyor of what he essentially wants, and not just peripherally. His essence is enclosed in this little bit of light down here.
Is that also what forces its way towards realization, that elevates from Lamata to Lamala? That little bit of light?
I don't know.
I
don't know about forces it. What forces it is our Bechira. He built us with. What forces it is Bechira, that he gave us free choice.
That little bit of light is what seeking realization. Was that what elevates us Lamala from
the what elevates us from below to above is that in this little bit of light is his panemius ratzon,
beautiful,
his innermost will.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And this creates aliyah after aliyah. Ilui achan ilui. If you've lost the place, please tell me. Ilui achan ilui. Nun alafim, right? We talked about the 50,000 yoivlois. Until you reach this level, v'al yedei haTorah, and through the Torah, this revelation of the source of the kav, the source of the beam, is realized down here through the Torah. And the Torah also, in addition to being a realization of the light at the beginning of the kav, is also a revelation of his or makif, his surrounding light, because this is what he desires. I keep using the word. I need to maybe bring forward that the or makif. I keep going like this because it says makif, right, encompassing. So it's a circle. It's also called the or hasoiviv, the light which encompasses, surrounds everything. But it has, and it's discussed at length in many Maimorim Chassidus, there are levels within this circle. The proximate level, the proximate level of consciousness, which is in Chokhmah, is the lowest level. It's like, here's your circle, right? Even though there's no top or bottom, right? If you position something outside the circle, in other words, imagine the circle and this pen is touching an edge of the circle. At that point of contact with the circle, that's a contact with what's called the chitzonius, the externality of the circle. and the circle has a middle and a outside circumference. So in circle, we can have a concept also of levels, but totally different than the structural top to bottom level of Panemius Mamalik element. But there are levels of expression, and in the deepest levels of expression, this is where God's delight is. It's called Tainug. In general, the Or HaSoviv is divided into two kinds of levels. Tainug, which is his delight, and Ratzon, which is more external, which is his will. Very much, and this is brought in Chassidus, I don't have to do any original thinking on this. Think about a person. What you have a delight in, what you have a desire in, is where you're going to focus your will. That's what's a natural state. I'll want to do the things that give me pleasure. And so, therefore, Ratzon, pleasure, will, is derived from Tainug, from delight. So there are levels in this as well. And the bottom of the heap of the Or HaSoviv is the window of Chokhmah. And from then on in, it channels down and fills in its own inimitable, all-encompassing way. With that, I, of course, lost the place. Va'inyan, okay. In Ois Beis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. Va'inyan, the first word in the line is Va'inyan. So what are we talking about? Is the following, as we said above. The main quality of revelation of godliness, as godliness invests itself in the vessels, comes through the elevation of the worlds back to their source in the Or Panimi, back to the source. Nun alafim leiglas, as we've talked about before, 50,000 levels of jubilees, Or Panimi, right? The Or that has a structure. Aliyah achar aliyah, one elevation after the other. Achi is gala order and so boroko, until you get to that level right beyond where you're pushing, let's go in Spiros, you're at the bottom, Malchus, and you're going up the chain now, right? And you're going up to, we'll go up the middle Kav, up to Yesod, and then up to Teferis, and then up to Das, and then up the middle Kav, if your next level of middle is called Kesser. That's the crown. The crown is all-encompassing, but in a certain way, we could say it's higher than, it's deeper than, even though it's a whole different higher and lower, it's deeper than, it's higher than any part of the Or Mamalik. So that's when, and as you go up that chain, you cross the boundary from Or Panimi, you cross it really in Chokhmah. Remember, Chokhmah me'ayin to Matzah, Chokhmah comes from the ayin. So just like Chokhmah brings down the Or Makif, it can also bring you through and upward into the Or Makif. The levels, if you would correspond to this in levels of consciousness of a human being, all the drives and all the deepest parts of ourselves come from that part of ourselves which we don't know in the same way that we know our conscious thinking. But at the same time, we can find a way back there through inverting it, inverting the mind so that it crosses the boundary and then moves into the what we call unknowable, ungraspable. But it's perceived as unknowable. We can perceive something as unknowable, that's Ormaki, but we can never know it because by definition it's beyond knowability. Okay, so it's Gala and so we can push through that little hole in the Chokhmah back to the Kaitze Shel Yud, the little thorn on the Yud, into the realm of the Or Ein Sof itself. So Hina Yisrael, the Jewish people, why is he bringing this out? Because that's where we Jewish people, Olam Shavta, right? Our soul comes from a very high level in God's brain. Even though it says thought, it's not the rational thought we're talking about, as we used the word thought earlier. We're talking about God's mind, and it says that the Jewish people, Olam Shavta, we're from a very deep place in his mind, where the conscious moves into the unconscious, or in our, everyday structure, conscious into subconscious, and subconscious into unconscious. I've mentioned this, well, this muscle may be helpful. I've mentioned it, I don't know if in this class and others, a muscle of a Freudian muscle that Freud created. It's called Freud's iceberg. You may have heard it before. I mean, the famous thing about iceberg, all you see about the iceberg is the tip of the iceberg, right? So that's, or panini, the tip of the iceberg. It's where God has condensed everything, and it's now coming out into that kav, that original primordial beam, which is the carrier beam for all of the detail of everything, right? But deeper than that, deeper in one mind, is the subconscious. You don't see it. And deeper than that is the iceberg, is the unconscious. That's like an iceberg, right? The most of it is underneath the sea. So similarly, we can dive, we'll use that muscle, with the proper diving apparatus, we can start moving into levels of subconscious, and with the right direction and learning, we can bring those things which are in our subconscious to consciousness, and that corresponds to bringing the nefesh elokis, the godly soul, whose residency is in the deepest submerged levels of God's consciousness, into consciousness. That's essentially in shorthand, what the whole of Avoida is all about, is to learn how to bring the deepest part of ourselves, which is the nefesh elokis, into action and actionability down here in the world of revealed things, in plain and simple bread and candles and wool, etc., etc. So that's the story. Hine Yisrael hamshichu ka'es be'es Matan Torah. So at the time of Matan Torah, we Jews, with our Jewish soul, drew down Isgala that was revealed then into Olam Hazeh, into this world, the Or Ein Sof, the infinite, subconscious, or Makif, came down into this world. And this was the big sea change, right? The big sea change that's spoken about in Chassidus, in all of reality, that had not occurred yet. What had occurred was a normal flow, the flow from the Or Makif and the transition into Or Panimi. There was always nothing else besides him. And at the same time, after the creation, there were individual things. But by Matan Torah, that which was totally subconscious, totally inexplicable, ungraspable, was infused into the physical. And now the physical became containers for the ineffable. And that's what are called the Davar Mitzvahs, the things with which we do a mitzvah. They're tied to him. They're tied to his essence. And that was what came down at Matan Torah. The highest of the highest of levels, meaning even into the Or Hamakif, came down and was invested in the simple wax that you make your Shabbos candle with, and in the simple wool that you make your tzitzis with. Okay, elevation after elevation, descent after descent, and the elevation part is going higher and higher in the Nud Alafim, in the 50 Yovel years, the Yoveles, Archi Yagia Legilizeh, until it reached upward into the Or Mamali, into the Or HaSoive. And through Torah, Nisgala Bechinis Gilizeh Ba'olam Hazeh. The revelation of the Or Makif was revealed, but I'm going to use the word infused, brought into the Or Soive was brought into the Or Mamale. Kieraisa, as the Zohar says, Kieraisa mehochma nafkes, that the Torah is drawn from Chochma. And we said Chochma, that's the instrument that makes the connection. The koyach ma Chochma, the power of that little upper yud in the yud of Chochma to bring down, interface with and bring down the Or HaSoive into Mamali. Yichud Or HaSoive v'Yamam, that's what it's called. And the shortest shorthand that I know, that I that I use and may be helpful to you. Every time you say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh means separated. Separated. Something is Kaddish, right? When you marry, a woman becomes Kaddish, separated to you. That's the level of Soivim. And Baruch is the level of drawn down. So when you say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, those HaKadosh Baruch Hu, those words are a union of the Or Soiviv and the Or Mamala. Every time you talk about, and we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Everyone's street talk talks about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so now maybe it will make a difference each time I say it. So the Or Ein Sof comes down. It's malubish, it's enclosed, gets enclosed in the faculties of Mamali, one after another, through the window of Chokhmah, Dafka specifically. Skip this little parenthesis. V'lochein, therefore, Atzilus nikra Chokhmah. Therefore, Atzilus, 4 worlds, right? 4 letters of the name of I. Yud Chokhmah. Yud, therefore, goes on the highest of the 4 worlds, which is the world of Atzilus. Yud is the letter that has a gateway into the ayin. As a result, the beings in the world of Atzilus, which are called Netzolim, they live in a state of carrying an opposite that's not opposite. They live as some things, they're emanated things, and at the same time, their experience is of the no-thingness. That's expressed in the Zohar, Ilu b'gamei echad. In Atzilus, he and what he brings about are in a state of oneness. Now, that's always true on any level, but in Atzilus, they perceive it. They perceive no contradiction between being a something and a nothing at the same time. That's Atzilus. That's the Yud of the Shem Havai. That's what Chokhmah is, the Me'ayin Temotzeh, comes from the Ayin. So that's therefore the Yud, excuse me, of Hashem's name corresponds to the union, the bridge point between Or Mamale, Or Soiviv, and Or Mamale. And therefore, that's the world of Atzilus. And the world of Atzilus is called, in the language of Kabbalah, it's called Chokhmah. Beklalis, Ha'olamis. It's the Chokhmah of all the generality of worlds. It's that place where all worlds, no matter where they are infused with and have a touch point of the infinite in the finite. Why is that? Why is that? Because in Chokhmah shines the Or of the Adam Kadmon, the primordial man. Primordial man is the 10 spheres before they become actualized. Again, something primordial in God, just like the Torah is primordial in God. The humanity and the mitzvahs are also primordial in God. But in the primordial state, they're a kind of chokhmah that isn't known yet because it hasn't emerged yet. Eliza, hi.
Hi. So I'm still trying to, I guess, internalize the concept of Atzilus, and that it both has a quality that's sort of the world, and at the same time not yet of the world, and of no thingness. And the only thing that I can think to is with the Tu B'Shvat Seder, in terms of Atzilus represented by, I'm thinking about the stage that it represents, and I just need something more concrete to sort of,
Right, I
like
could
a
do that.
touchstone.
I could do that. I could help you with that. But what do you mean? What are you thinking about particularly in the Tu B'Shvat Seder?
Well, I know that we have like a regular Seder, there are Arba Kosos, and where it's a steady progression.
Right.
And so I know each one represents the 4 different worlds.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
So we're going from a white wine, for those who drink the wine, to a red wine.
Oh,
and
okay.
it becomes, progressively more red.
Mm-hmm.
The
Okay.
fruits, and the fruits, there are those that have the representing let's say the klipas noga, where there's
Okay.
there's the shell, the peel, there's the edible, there's but I'm trying to wrap my head around Atzilus, and I'm just not.
Okay, Atzilus. Atzilus, if you can imagine, we'll take the wine. the white wine versus the red wine, right? If you have white light, how do you, what is it that allows a white light to come out how is it that white light can cause a rainbow? How is that?
It's refracted with water.
It's refracted with water.
Refracted.
Okay. So, but it indicates, does it not, that in that whiteness were all the colors of the rainbow, but not in a manifest state. Yes? No.
So
You can't get something from nothing.
potential. So you're saying it's the potential.
It's the potential when you're talking about time, right? Or space. You put a prism in front, you do something, and you reveal something which was hidden in it, right? When we're talking about Atzilus, that which is hidden in the lower world experience, i.e. all I would see would be white light, is revealed in the world of Atzilus. There's no contradiction, very little. It's a world after all. By the way, you have to encompass it. Oilam is by definition elam, which means concealed. There's a certain amount of concealment, otherwise it couldn't be a world. It couldn't be separated, call it one of the four. But there's so little concealment of this shift from white to red of the prism. There's so little existential presence of anything called a prism that at the same time that it experiences itself as a world, it also experiences that which precedes worlds.
So is, let's say, a seed, an apple seed, is that an example of both the...
Well, the apple seed from our viewpoint is like that. There's something in it completely hidden, and only when you plant it then it will become revealed. I mean, if that's what you're asking, yes. If you're asking, does the seed have that perception? I don't know. In other words, you're asking if the world, does a seed like the body, is a seed like the entities in Atzilus, that while it's a seed, it perceives what it came from and where it's going? I don't know. But from our point of view, when we stand outside of it, we know that seed contains two things. One, the front and center present of its singularity and its definition, and an infinite possibility for what's going to flower from it that we don't see. So from that perspective, it's a decent analogy. It's something concrete, and at the same time, we know that there's something very beautifully articulated and plural that's going to come from this singularity. So in that respect, that perspective is the perspective of Atzilus. It perceives and lives with its entityness, and at the same time, it perceives and lives with its non-entityness. For us, that's a paradox. It's a contradiction. But in Atzilus, there's no contradiction. They say about God, I've used the expression, I've told you this expression many times before, a little Kabbalistic shorthand about God is Noise Hafochim. He's the one who's able to carry opposites, and they're not opposites. For us, they're opposites. For him, it's not. In Atzilus, it's similar. These two things, entityness and no entityness, something and nothing, exist simultaneously.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I mean, it's the most you can say about it, but we don't really have an experience of that. But that's the way it is. Okay. Why? Because the line begins with Lefi. Because Sheboy, in the world of Atzilus, so maybe now having said that, maybe his words will make more sense. In the world of Atzilus, Mer Bechinas Chochma da Adam Kadma. That's where we were. There shines in the world of Atzilus Chochma da Adam Kadma. On the one hand, it's Chochma, but Adam Kadma, the primordial man, is the root source of man before any contour or picture or image or structure emerges, right? So in Atzilus, there is Chochma of Atzilus, that's the Yud of the Shem Havaya, manifests a notion of a man, but before and deeper than there's any formation, which we actually experience as head, limbs, legs, etc. So that's called Chochma da Adam Kadmo. the wisdom of the primordial man. Let me finish the sentence. Shemislabish al yedei hamalchus to Adam Kadmon, and that's enclosed in Malchus, the sphere of Malchus of Adam Kadmon. See, to speak about spheros, our minds, at least now, are educated enough. Too much education can be harmful, right? We're educated enough. As soon as I start talking Chokmah, Bina, Da, Malchus, you're thinking vertical structure. I'm sure all of you are, because you've been around those teachings enough to, I'm sure you are. But at the same time, now try to imagine a vertical structure that exists before any notion of verticality or horizontality, if that's the word. A potential for, there's your seed, a potential for flowering, but I see the flowering that's in a state of potential. I'm just a seed, but I'm seeing both my seedness, which is just a seed, and all the flowering that really is within me. So that's the state of Atzilus. Jonathan and Eliza. Jonathan was first. Go ahead. Jonathan's not done. Then Eliza, you want to go again?
So I have a different than way of looking at Atzilus, maybe. That
Hope so.
in terms of the potential, so when we see, and I'm thinking about a specific talk of the Lubavitcher Rebbe regarding the Churban, that where so many people focus on the destruction, and he referred to it as the preparing for the construction, and like a forest fire. So we see the remnants.
Yep.
About, let me think, was it 2 years ago? I think it was two years ago. My husband and I were hiking around Bear Mountain. And then we went back later on in the summer after there had been a forest fire. And you could see the devastation on one side and the green on the other side of the path. It was so stark, the contrast. But what looked like devastation, in my head, and then shared with my husband, if we take the lens of the potential of what will come out of this earth that looks to our eyes like it's scorched, but really it's that much more fertile for so many things to grow.
Yep.
So that fertile scorched earth concept, it's that Atzilus. Am I getting it?
Well, if you see both, if you see the scorch
Yes.
and at the same time, then that's the view of Atzilus. Yes.
Okay, so that's the
viewpoint.
duality. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. You got it.
Rabbi, I found my microphone. Rabbi, very quickly, what I wanted to just ask you is both recognizing a vessel, something in existence, and the nothingness. But how can
That's correct.
Torah or the perception or the awareness to recognize both?
That's Atzilus. We
What?
don't live it. That's the viewpoint of Atzilus. We don't know that viewpoint. We don't have that viewpoint. By us, those things are contradictory, and that's why you have the question, because we're not an Atzilus being. But deep down inside of us, that Chelek Elokah, that part of God up above, before any talk about this, does have a sense of that, and that's why these ideas resonate so much. That's why we're here. Instead of getting bored by this, we're getting sort of into it because it resonates. There's a resonant frequency. There's a resonant frequency where we do have a sense of this reality, even though that's not what we touch and feel every moment. We have Atzilus within us. It's the Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's the Shem Havaya, which is within us. And on that note, we're going to stop because it's past our hour. It's interesting, isn't it interesting how little ground we cover in the Maimah? But to me, it's beautiful. I hope it is to you. It must be, otherwise you wouldn't keep coming back.
Great class, Robert. Great
It's
share.
wonderful. And if anything, I'm hoping it was recorded so I can catch the first part that I missed.
It is recorded.
Okay,
It'll be on YouTube when others. Okay. And listen, one thing I don't do too much is market this thing, but other people out there would probably love it. And if you have friends or your Facebook friends or not or real friends, I'll turn them on to it, and let them come aboard and enjoy it as well.
Thank you. May I
Rob-
share? Christine?
Rob, I'll be glad to post also on Facebook to share it. Rob,
Beautiful.
you mentioned that the seeds or potentiality for both the recognizing the vessel on the one hand and the nothingness, which you mentioned before, use the term nothingness, which is the source of the seeds and understanding of that vessel. But you don't literally mean nothingness. You mean that as a translation as Yesh
I've said that many times. Nothingness is no thingness. It
No
doesn't have
physical-
tangibility.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Not absence, the absence of any physical presence or
No, I mean any spiritual presence. It has no presence. It's before presence. It has no form, shape, matter of any sort.
potentiality. You're saying that the Shem seed, not literal seed, is there in that non-presence, correct?
Yeah, but that's just a metaphor for
Okay.
something that has no thingness yet.
No thingness that got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay, guys.
okay,
I'm gonna. You can do this offline if you want, but I've got to get
thank you.
going. All
Thank
right,
Okay.
and we'll continue Emir Session next
you.
week. Okay, bye bye.
Thank